The Yugoslav tragedy. Decades of terror. Neighbors become deadly enemies. Millions lose their homes. More than 100,000 lose their lives. The uninhibited cruelty in southeastern Europe horrifies the world.
Violence was used to send messages. Murder, rape, all of this was to say, if you stay, this is what will happen to you.
A conflict that no one ever thought possible, driven by ideological incendiaries Tudjman and Milosevic, two ruthless nationalists.
Milosevic just wanted power and wanted influence. Tudjman wanted to break up Yugoslavia, wanted to create a greater Croatia. He actually believed all this nationalist stuff.
After almost 40 years of peace under the dictator Tito, the country falls into the abyss. For too long, Europe and the USA stand idly by.
They didn't clearly see the interest in getting involved and arresting the bloodshed.
Why did the peoples of Yugoslavia become sworn enemies? And what blame lies with the global community for the magnitude of this war? (1991). Yugoslavia falls apart. Fierce fighting breaks out in Croatia. The Serbian territories want to split off by force and expel all non-Serbs from the republic. They believe no Croat should ever be allowed to live here and are supported by the former Joint Army.
The Yugoslavian People's Army practically disintegrated in 1991, and what was left were those who were for Yugoslavia, or in other words, who were for a large, strong Serbia.
The bloodiest battle of the Croatian War began on 14th September 1991 in Vukovar, a town directly on the border with Serbia in the region of eastern Slavonia. The superiority of the largely Serbian army is overwhelming. 30,000 soldiers and militiamen face off against just 3,000 Croatians. Up to 8,000 shells hit Vukovar day after day. Scars of the fighting are still visible today, and Stjepan Vidakovic still can't understand how former neighbors and friends became mortal enemies so suddenly.
Before the war, the coexistence between Croats and Serbs was excellent. We worked together, hung out, played football together, everything. There was no problem at all.
After a few weeks, large parts of Vukovar lie in ruins. On the 2nd of November 1991, Serbs attacked the district of Lusac, where Stjepan Vidakovic led the resistance fighters. This house served as a base for his men. Stjepan walks through the very halls where he was injured by a grenade.
And then the roof flew away. I stood next to the wall, and I felt a blow here. And then I realized I was bleeding.
There's shrapnel in his arm. His brother drives him to the hospital. The rest of the family stays behind. While Stjepan Vidakovic is treated in the hospital of Vukovar, Serbian units murder all who have stayed behind in Lusac. 9 of Vidakovic's family members are shot that day, including his wife and son. Their remains are only found years later in a mass grave. 3 relatives are still missing today.
I'm not angry with anybody. I don't hate anybody. It is unnecessary, but no one was convicted, and no one knows anything. No one has seen anything. No one was there. All innocent. Aliens just came down and killed people.
The causes of this cruel war are deeply rooted in the turbulent history of the Balkans. In retrospect, national tensions in Yugoslavia were inevitable. Yugoslavia is a patchwork of peoples with centuries of conflicts between them. Three great powers struggle across generations to keep the Balkans under control. The Ottomans conquer the southern territories. The House of Habsburg, later known as Austria and Hungary, control the north. The eastern edge of the Balkans falls under the Russian Empire's field of dominance. Serbs, Croats, and Slovenians become pawns on a geopolitical chessboard. The result is a torn region full of disputes and resentments between neighbors. The largest ethnic group are the Serbs, but in the 20th century, more than a third of them live outside of Serbia. The Kingdom of Yugoslavia develops under their dominance, which unites all southern Slavs in one country for the first time. Serbs, Croats, Slovenians, Bosnians, Montenegrins, and Macedonians.
The kingdom is from the very beginning seen as a Serbian project as opposed to a Yugoslav project.
In 1934, King Alexander I falls victim to a nationalistic Croatian terrorist group, the Ustasha. His assassination further fuels hatred between the ethnic groups.
It was accompanied by the growth of radical nationalism, particularly amongst the Croats, also amongst the Macedonians. And this was going to pave the way for a really terrible, terrible chain of events.
During the Second World War, Germany and Italy support the Ustasha. The Axis powers conquered Yugoslavia and divided amongst themselves. In Croatia, they install a fascist state, led by Ustasha founder, Ante Pavelić. The fascist dictator wants a greater Croatia that excludes all other ethnic groups. His racial laws result in the systematic extermination of Jews and Roma. The Serbs are also chased, expelled, or murdered. Following the German example, Pavelić has around 40 concentration camps built for the so-called enemies of the Croatian race. Around 400,000 people are savagely murdered. The Ustasha doesn't kill in gas chambers, but with knives, hammers, or axes. Most of their victims are Serbs. Resistance groups rose up to fight the Ustasha. The largest were the partisans, led by Josip Broz, who gave himself the combat name Tito. 80,000 men and women support the charismatic marshal, fighting against the fascist occupiers and their Croatian henchmen. More and more volunteers joined them.
And you have stories of people running off as children to go and fight with the partisans. So there was something that was romanticized about it in this terrible war-like setting. And then I think it was also, people were motivated by the leaders, particularly in Serbia, of let's fight, let's defend.
In 1944, the Soviet army rolls through Belgrade. With their big communist brothers' help, the partisans free the country from fascism. Tito becomes prime minister of a new state, the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which wants to recognize all different Balkan nations. The hero of the partisan fight rises to become a political superstar, the great white hope of the Balkans.
All Yugoslavs were looking for peace and stability, and he was the one who was able to offer it.
Tito wants to create a new country that will peacefully unite the Balkans at last.
Ne može biti snažne i spretne Srbije, Slovenije, Makedonije, Crne Gore, Bosne i Herzegovine.
The country consists of 6 constituent republics: Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Macedonia. Vojvodina and Kosovo are defined as autonomous provinces of Serbia. The Communist Party also leaves the choice of official language to the individual regions. Yugoslavia invests in infrastructure and successfully transitions from an agrarian economy to an industrial state. This shift is made possible with massive support from the West, especially the USA. When Tito plans a union of all Balkan countries, Moscow expels Yugoslavia from the Communist World Organization. Tito subsequently establishes a new socialism, a third way between Western capitalism and the Soviet-planned economy. The country experiences an economic miracle, with the highest growth rate worldwide. This success also strengthens solidarity in the country. The former partisan unions now become the Yugoslavian National Liberation Army. It is Tito's army, and the 4th largest in Europe. Most of the soldiers are Serbs. Serbian officers hold almost all high military ranks. After the break with Stalin, the USA also willingly supplies military aid. Whole shiploads of modern weapons arrive in Yugoslav ports.
As far as the Americans were concerned, this break in the communist world was a tactical advantage, and they weren't going to see Tito slip back to the Soviet side.
After Stalin's death, the relationship with the Soviet Union thaws. But Tito shows no interest in returning to the Eastern Bloc. While the Cold War intensifies, he reaffirms Yugoslavia stays neutral.
Belgrad. In der Stunde weltweiter Gefahr für den Frieden trafen sich in der jugoslawischen Hauptstadt die Vertreter einer dritten Kraft zwischen Ost und West.
Tito initiates a new movement, the Organization of Non-Aligned States, an alliance of 24 countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia.
And so Yugoslavia's prestige around the world was suddenly elevated beyond all measure compared to the size and the influence of the country.
From the 1960s onwards, tourism also brings money into the country. Adriatic countries Croatia and Slovenia must share their income with poorer republics, which causes resentment. But Tito suffocates conflicts among ethnic groups, along with any criticism of his regime.
If you saw a flare-up of nationalism in Serbia, Tito would get rid of it. If you saw it in Croatia, brutally repress it. And this was how the balance was kept.
By the 1970s, it becomes clear that Yugoslavia's prosperity is just a house of cards, built on massive foreign debt. With economic decline, the first republics demand more autonomy. Tito makes hesitant concessions, but mostly continues to keep the peace through repression.
The Yugoslav identity was not a fiction. It was something that was forged after the Second World War, and to a degree it worked, but it was, of course, dependent upon the one-party state and Tito's iron fist of control.
Josip Broz Tito dies on the 4th of May, 1980. 35 years after its creation, the multi-ethnic state loses its idol. 500,000 people from all constituent republics say goodbye to the dictator. Shortly after Tito's death, however, the first protests against the successor government in Belgrade break out in Kosovo. And in the following 10 years, more and more republics split off. 2 firebrands caused the Balkan powder keg to explode. The Serbian communist leader Slobodan Milosevic wants power over the whole of Yugoslavia and rallies the Serbs against other ethnic groups, first against the Albanians in Kosovo, then against the Croats.
What Milosevic had was he was smart, he understood the way the world worked, and he, I think, very early on saw the power of nationalism.
In Croatia, Franjo Tuđman wants to radically free his compatriots from Serbian domination. The republic declares itself independent. Tuđman's model is the Croatian state of 1941, in which the nationalist Ustasha ruled with Hitler's help.
Everywhere you went in Croatia, once Tuđman was in power, you saw the U of the Ustasha. It was a festival of extreme Croatian nationalism, and nobody could doubt what the intentions of Tuđman were.
The agitation of the 2 politicians drives the former Yugoslavia towards a war no one thinks is possible. On the threshold of the 21st century, in the middle of Europe. In 1991, the fighting between Croats and Serbs causes more deaths and reveals new atrocities every day. The rest of Europe faces the so-called ethnic cleansings on the Balkans, almost helplessly. In September 1991, the European community invites the parties to a peace conference in The Hague.
The fighting must stop.
Both sides present themselves as victims.
Hrvatski je narod, jedan od najstarijih povijesnih naroda Europe, koji je unatoč tragici svog geopolitičkog položaja uspio očuvati kontinuitet svoje državnosti.
The opponents are unforgiving.
Installing of totalitarian chauvinist regime in Croatia directly violated human rights, peace, and an overall democratic development in Yugoslavia.
The European community is too concerned with itself to prevent further bloodshed.
There was the German reunification, there was the Iraq War, there was Maastricht, European unification. These were all problems with which Europe was fully occupied. Yugoslavia was a lower priority.
Even world powers stay out of the conflict. In Moscow, the newly elected President Yeltsin struggles with the consequences of the collapse of the Soviet Union. The USA have just been through a war in Iraq and see Yugoslavia as a European problem for the time being.
For the United States, they didn't clearly see the interest in getting involved and arresting the bloodshed. It wasn't worth risking, in the United States' eye, bloodshed or any kind of American lives to stop the war in Yugoslavia.
In January 1992, the UN manages to negotiate a ceasefire with the Serbs. But the military conflict in Croatia is only frozen at a moment when Slobodan Milosevic has already achieved his goals. 1/3 of the country is under Serbian control. Meanwhile, the conflict also breaks out in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Christians, Jews, and Muslims have lived together here for centuries. 1/3 of the population are Serbs. When the international community recognizes Bosnia's independence from Yugoslavia, the Serbs fight back violently. The masses are stirred up by Radovan Karadzic, the Bosnian Serb leader. For him, all non-Serbs are enemies, especially the Bosnian Muslims.
Karadzic was obsessed with creating a Serbian state in which all Serbs would live together and from which all non-Serbs would have to disappear, especially the Bosnian Muslims, whom he regarded as the original enemy of the Serbian people, as something foreign and inferior.
His willing servant is Ratko Mladic, former colonel of the now disbanded Yugoslavian People's Army, a brutal Serbian hardliner. His first target is the city of Bijeljina, where his army rehearses its tactics of war. As in Croatia, paramilitaries are an important part of Serbian warfare. Mladic deliberately uses sexualized violence as a weapon of war. His soldiers systematically and brutally rape Muslim women. Nusreta Sivac is one of them. In 1992, the judge is taken to a Serbian camp near her hometown of Prijedor.
The nights were an ordeal. During the day, prisoners were interrogated there. The rooms were full of blood, the floor was full of blood, the walls were full of blood. The instruments of torture were often left lying around.
As a young woman, she stays imprisoned in the Omarska camp for 3 months.
We had to do everything the guards commanded, and of course, do with them what they wanted. We never talked about it in the camp, never with each other. But our silence and our absence after the sexual abuse said it all.
Hundreds of thousands of Bosnian Muslims flee the contested areas. By the end of the war, their numbers will top 2 million.
Many were displaced within the Yugoslav region, within other Yugoslav states, or within other parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many, hundreds of thousands, went around the world, parts of Europe, parts of North America, looking for protection, looking for different and better lives.
The atrocities in Bosnia happen with the consent of one man. Slobodan Milosevic supports the war from Belgrade. In April 1992, Serbian fighters also target the capital, Sarajevo. Karadzic and Mladic want to drive all non-Serbs out of the city. From the surrounding mountains, they attack Sarajevo. The occupation will last 3 years. Mladic orders his snipers to shoot at everything that comes into their sights. Unbelievable atrocities, in full view of the United Nations. Even the dispatched UN soldiers cannot stop the killings. Their mission is limited to humanitarian aid in the city and the surrounding areas. They have to watch snipers attack and kill people on the open road. In the besieged city, needs keep growing. Medicine and food are in short supply. There's no electricity and hardly any water. Units of the Bosnian army secretly dig a tunnel almost 800 meters long under the airport's taxiway. It will be a lifeline for 300,000 trapped Sarajevo residents. The project remains top secret. Not even the UN troops know about it. Nevertheless, Bosnian President Alija Izetbegović confesses to his Muslim brothers in faith. The situation is hopeless. The United Nations reject any military intervention in the war.
No member state was willing to go into military action. A military operation would have put the lives of their soldiers at risk.
Instead, Islamist fighters from Afghanistan, Albania, Chechnya, and other countries come to Bosnia. About 6,000 mujahideen who don't fear war crimes and cruelly murder prisoners. But this conflict soon becomes even more complex. As early as 1992, the Serb-populated areas of Bosnia unite to form a kind of state structure. The so-called Republika Srpska includes large areas in the north and east of the country. Suddenly, another front emerges in the west, because Tudjman has been planning to absorb the Bosnian territories into Croatia for some time. Until then, Croats and Muslims were fighting together against the Serbs, an alliance of convenience that now falls apart.
The Croats from Bosnia were in many ways seen as the most nationalist, the most extreme, and they often saw their capital as Zagreb and not Sarajevo. So what they wanted to do, ultimately, was to join with Croatia and have a Croatian state.
One of the main hubs of this new conflict is the city of Mostar. The Croats want to make Mostar the capital of a Bosnian Croat state and drive all Muslims out of the city. Zoran Laketa will never forget the day it all began, the 8th of May, 1993. Zoran wants to pick up his brother on the east side of the river for a wedding.
This day was supposed to be one of the most beautiful. My buddy was getting married. He's a Croat, and he married a Bosnian woman.
But his brother doesn't come. Tonight, Mostar is split in two. Croatian fighters occupy the west of the city. Bosnian Muslims hold the east, the old town. Zoran happens to be in Croatian territory and is forcibly conscripted, even though he is Serbian. He has no choice and must fire on the part of the city where his brother and many friends live.
I was just thinking about survival and my little daughter. I never thought about shooting, or killing my brother, or a neighbor, or anyone else I knew.
On the 8th of June, 1993, Zoran's brother is killed by a Croatian grenade. The Bosnian Muslims in the old town of Mostar are cut off from the outside world while the attacks continue. The Croatian enemies are militarily superior and fight fiercely against their former allies. For months, Croatian commander Slobodan Praljak doesn't allow any aid convoys to pass. Muslim soldiers who had fought side by side with the Croats are locked up in camps. The Croatian attacks don't spare the city's landmarks either. The old Ottoman bridge has held the city together for almost 500 years, until it is bombed by Croatian tanks on the 8th of November, 1993. So far, the United States have stayed out of the Yugoslav tragedy, but are increasingly criticizing the inability of the Europeans to act. Only the newly elected Democrat Bill Clinton is ready to put an end to the war in the Balkans. The power of images dominates the global conversation. Numerous media reports about the suffering in Bosnia increase pressure on Clinton and other world leaders.
The scenes of violence, what was happening. You had the besieged citizens of Sarajevo, people going to get water and they would be killed, not being able to survive. And those pictures, the television, which played a huge role in determining public opinion at that point, made it impossible for not to intervene.
America begins to support the Croats in building a powerful army. U.S. military advisors trained the Croatian soldiers in strategic warfare. In exchange, the USA want Tudjman to stop fighting Bosnian Muslims and go back to fighting alongside them against the Serbs. In March 1994, Croatian President Tudjman and Bosnian President Izetbegović sign a peace agreement in Washington. They agree to form a common territory, a Croatian-Bosnian Federation, a handshake that will soon put pressure on the Serbs. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims have already fled Bosnia by this time. Their last enclaves have been under UN protection since the beginning of 1993. One of them is the city of Srebrenica. Surrounded by Serbian units, full of fear, medical care and food are scarce. The French UN General Morillon sees the circumstances in Srebrenica and promises help.
You are now under the protection of the UN forces.
The United Nations announced the formation of the 6 safe areas, and then those people who insist on the creation of the safe areas, they're all asked for troops, and they look down to the floor and sort of shuffle their feet, and they do nothing. Those safe areas were sitting ducks, even with the UN there.
Meanwhile, the United Nations established the International Criminal Court for former Yugoslavia in The Hague. The tribunal prosecutes all former and current war crimes committed in the Western Balkans.
It was a great historical precedent, but it was also something of an empty gesture. There'd been pressure from the outside to take action over the events in Bosnia and Herzegovina because of the allegations of genocide and war crimes. This was seen as a step.
On the 11th of July, Ratko Mladic and his troops breached the Srebrenica protection zone. Almost all Muslims have left the city by now. Most of the men have fled into the woods at the last moment, hoping to make their way on foot to the next protection zone. Women and children, along with a few hundred men, seek shelter in the Dutch Blue Helmet camp 6 kilometers away.
I went to the United Nations with my daughter. But when I saw how many men were on their way to the base, I ran back to get my son. But he refused and said, "No, Mom, I'm not a woman. I'm not going to the base."
The UN soldiers have no chance against the advancing Serbs and offer no resistance. The Dutch UN commander Karamans negotiates with Ratko Mladic about evacuating the refugees. Eventually, women and children are allowed to leave the camp in buses. No one knows of Mladic's plans, but people notice that men are purposefully sorted out.
We saw that too, and we realized that it wouldn't end well for the men. But it was inconceivable that it could take on such proportions.
Fadila Efendic and her daughter are among the women who leave the camp in Potocari. Fadila boards the bus, hoping to see her husband and son again soon.
The last thing I heard was that my husband and son were alive and safe. I left Potocari with this thought. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to get on a truck and leave. I would have looked for them.
Almost all Muslim men in the camp are shot dead on the same day. The men who have fled are hunted by Mladic's troops, even with tanks. The refugees are weak, starving, unable to defend themselves. Those who fall into Serbian fighters' hands are gunned down. More than 8,000 Muslim men and boys are brutally executed. Srebrenica experiences the most heinous war crimes since the Second World War, caused in part by the powerlessness of the United Nations. Meanwhile, in Croatia, President Tudjman, with US support, prepares the retaliatory strike against the Serbs. Serb-occupied areas such as the Krajina region are to become Croatian again.
The Krajina was at its end. There was nothing it could do. The Croats were now well armed, they were well organized as a military, and they were determined to get that territory back.
The outmanned Serbian troops retreat from Krajina before the Croatian attack begins. Serbian authorities decide to evacuate Krajina. More than 150,000 inhabitants flee their homeland in fear of Croatian revenge. Most of them never return. Those who are unable to flee are killed without hesitation by the advancing forces. More war crimes, this time committed by Croats on Serbs. In Bosnia, the war continues. In late August 1995, a Serbian shell lands in front of the market hall of Sarajevo. About 40 civilians die. An attack with far-reaching consequences. The West intervenes. 2 days later, NATO begins Operation Deliberate Force against the Bosnian Serb army. It is the first combat operation in the history of the alliance. Its first goal? To liberate Sarajevo after more than 3 years of siege. More than 200 combat aircrafts from America, France, and Great Britain are deployed around Sarajevo. The NATO airstrikes have an effect. The Bosnian Serb army gradually withdraws. In early October, Sarajevo is finally free. After 1,425 days, a bit of everyday life returns step by step. The longest siege of the 20th century is over. In the following weeks, NATO bombers, along with Croatian and Muslim forces, pushed the Bosnian Serbs back east and forced the Serbian leadership in Belgrade to the negotiating table.
Milosevic needed a deal to end the armed hostilities, and the internationals desperately needed a deal so that things wouldn't continue.
Peace talks take place at the U.S. Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. A solution for the Bosnia conflict seems to be in sight. But it takes 3 grueling weeks until the international community can force the breakthrough. The Americans conspicuously pack their bags, seemingly ready to leave.
This had the pleasant effect that everyone was shocked, because they also had to ask themselves, what actually happens when we return empty-handed? That caused a certain jolt. It was a real marathon.
The heads of state meet in Paris to sign the Dayton Agreement on the 14th of December. The Bosnian War ends after 43 months. The federal state of Bosnia-Herzegovina remains formally in existence. 49% of the territory is assigned to the Serbian Republika Srpska, 51% to the Federation of Croats and Bosnian Muslims.
The Dayton Peace Agreement enshrined the gains of war. We all criticize the Dayton Peace Agreement, but in many ways, it was the only agreement that could be reached at the time. And letting the war go on would have only cost more lives and bloodshed, refugees, and destruction.
The Dayton Agreement is a turning point in Yugoslavia's long death struggle. Now, Kosovo will be the focal point, the Serbian province between Montenegro and Macedonia. Almost 90% of Kosovars are Muslim Albanians. For a long time, they wanted to be an equal republic within Yugoslavia and not ruled by Serbs. For years, the Albanians have been revolting against the Serbian oppressors, against employment and university bans, restrictions to their freedom. Now, they have a new strategy.
The lesson of Dayton was the way to get independence and recognition was to fight a war. And that was what many Albanians saw as the only possible solution.
In 1996, the Kosovo Liberation Army, KLA, appears on the scene. An Albanian underground organization that wants to achieve Kosovo's independence by force. In the beginning, it has around 1,000 fighters. The tactics of the KLA are simple. Fighters target Serbian police stations, kill policemen, and then flee into the woods. Guerrilla warfare, meant to provoke the Serbs. The United States initially placed the KLA on the list of international terrorist organizations. A military intervention in Kosovo is out of the question for the West.
Kosovo was not an international border. Kosovo was a border within Serbia. It was an administrative border. So I think the reluctance to intervene was very much based on the fact that it was intervening within Serbia.
The KLA increases pressure, even murdering Albanian civilians who cooperate with the Serbs. Almost 40% of Kosovo is brought under its control by 1998.
Ne jemi të gatshëm dhe në rand parë me bërë luftën në Kosovë, për shlirimin e Kosovës. Po që se ka nevojë dhe shohëm se nuk bëhet ashtu si duhet luftë, megjithëse ashtu kështu është luftë shumë e barabartë, atëherë ne do të morëm edhe hapa të tjerë që janë nevojshëm me kohën.
The KLA clearly had the goal of provoking a harsh backlash to arouse the interest of the international community and possibly draw the international community into a military intervention in Kosovo.
In the spring of 1998, Slobodan Milosevic sends special police and army units to Kosovo for the first time to put the KLA in its place. Attacks on Albanian civilians happened throughout the province. Even though the KLA also carries out massacres, images of Albanian victims dominate the global news cycles. They cause the mood in the West to change. Nobody wants to allow a second Bosnia, another humanitarian catastrophe. In the late summer of 1998, 200,000 Kosovo Albanians are already fleeing. The KLA's plan works. The West takes the side of the Albanians.
The US and a broader international Western community had been engaged with Milosevic for 10 years. It was time to stop Milosevic, time to stop these Serbian campaigns and have a reckoning. That meant allying with the KLA, even if some of its actions had previously been questionable.
NATO steps in. The US Air Force and the Royal Air Force participate in the air raids, but many other alliance partners are also willing to send aircraft to Kosovo, among them Denmark, Belgium, Italy, and Germany. NATO's first airstrikes are directed against Serbian military installations. It's meant to be a short, clean war. The German pilots are to destroy radar installations. While NATO drops bombs, the situation on the ground worsens. Serbian troops in Kosovo feel challenged by the West and take ruthless action against the Albanian population. Serbian armed forces trigger the largest wave of refugees of the entire war. Almost 800,000 people are violently expelled from Kosovo. They seek shelter in Albania and Macedonia. At the same time, British and US fighter jets are taking off daily towards Serbia. Their bombs destroy industrial plants and factories, even in the capital, Belgrade. But civilian residents also suffer from the attacks.
At some point, they started dropping graphite bombs. Then the electricity was gone and we had no more water.
Olivera Petronic experiences the blackouts and water shortages. The NATO attacks are increasingly aimed at the perseverance of the Serbian population. Reports of civilian casualties pile up. In April, NATO missiles hit an express train. 14 people are killed. A little later, a bomb falls on the RTS television station in the middle of Belgrade. 16 employees die. Young people, especially technicians.
That was a great tragedy. These people were not victims near military objects. They were simply killed at their workplaces.
NATO intervention is costing more and more Serbian civilians their lives. It is estimated that more than 1,500 people die in Serbia as a result of the airstrikes. Around 5,000 are injured.
For many, they were the greatest criminals in the world. And this is still the case today. Most people in Serbia see NATO that way. There are no two opinions. They bombed us, and that's all.
Only 4 weeks later, in the beginning of June 1999, Slobodan Milosevic unexpectedly gives in.
Dragi građani, srećan nam mir. U ovom trenutku naše prve misli treba da budu posvećene herojima koji su dali svoje živote u odbrani otadžbine, u borbi za slobodu i dostojanstvo svog naroda. Nismo dali Kosovo.
Kosovo becomes a UN protectorate within the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The United Nations establish a transitional administration and send Blue Helmet soldiers, the so-called Kosovo Force. 50,000 soldiers from 39 countries are tasked with securing peace in Kosovo. Their mission continues to this day. In Belgrade, Slobodan Milosevic remains in power for another year after the end of the war.
When he finally left power, left Serbia in a position where it was, in many ways, tattered. Sanctions, it had been bombed, people were disillusioned, there was a sense of uncertainty in every way.
In 2001, Serbia's new pro-Western government delivers Slobodan Milosevic to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, where he is charged with crimes against humanity. In March 2006, before the trial is over, he dies in his cell. He continues to be held in high esteem by many Serbs. Bosnian leader Radovan Karadzic and his army chief Ratko Mladic are caught by authorities years later. They are sentenced to life in prison. A total of 160 men and 1 woman are accused before the Hague Tribunal. 2/3 of the convicted war criminals are Serbs. The Croat Slobodan Praljak, who commanded the attack on Mostar, swallows poison after his conviction in 2017. The court is overwhelmed by the complete legal review of the Yugoslav tragedy.
One thing that maybe was expected, and it hasn't done, is to create both an authoritative historical record that everybody will recognize, and with that, some kind of reconciliation around that agreed record.
After a decade of bloodshed, the region seems to have come to rest. The Western Balkans have been rearranged. Serbia, Montenegro, and today's Northern Macedonia have declared their candidacy for EU membership. Bosnia has been divided since the war. The peace agreement has frozen the country's ethnic divisions. Kosovo may have declared its independence, but Serbia refuses to acknowledge the autonomy of the Albanians. The conflicts of the 1990s still simmer.
If international forces were to withdraw from Kosovo, if the international presence were to be removed from Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think I would have little doubt that within 18 months there'd be a return to armed hostilities.
Peace in the Western Balkans remains fragile. One spark could be enough to cause the powder keg to explode again.